presentation. A friend of mine in college once told me, don't ever start out a talk by apologizing. But I'm gonna disagree with him and I'm gonna apologize. I'm not a paid public speaker, so I just want to warn you guys up front. You came here expecting like something awesome. You came to the wrong place. What I hope to do is I hope to kind of flesh out the mandatory practice process for MFL. Kind of go through a little bit of timber sale management, just kind of help you guys through that process. It's going to be an overview, but hopefully can get you guys kind of squared away. I'm going to introduce a couple of folks for you real quick. Let's see. Keith Krajewski, he's my supervisor stationed in Eau Claire. Next to him is, I just went blank on your name, John Rasmussen. He's the integrated forester here in Alma, services Buffalo County. We got Bill Clace, he's a UW extension agent. We've got Dennis Reimers, he's a federal NRCS. And then we got Wyatt Hint. He's also for NRCS. So, and then I'm Brent Weaver. I'm the tax law forestry specialist for Buffalo County. I've been working in Buffalo County for 20 years. So been here a little while. It wasn't always tax law. We used to do everything, but now I'm specifically in charge of administering the managed forest law program. So we are here today because you got a letter in the mail that said, most of you at least probably got a letter in the mail that said you guys had a mandatory practice due. So again, the purpose of this program, this talk, is to kind of help you understand the process that you guys need to go through to get that mandatory practice accomplished. So I'm going to cover that, and then we're going to cover some timber sale kind of basics, some things that you should be thinking about when you're doing a timber sale. So, and bear with us as we figure out technology. Hang on.
I think you have to leave it flat on surface for.
Like I said, don't expect.
There you go.
There we go. All right. So this is just kind of a list of what we're going to hope to cover today. Again, just steps to complete your mandatory practice. So we'll go kind of through that process for you. The benefits of a harvest, I'll touch on that briefly. That's kind of a talk in itself. Rules or roles for folks that are going to be involved in that mandatory practice for you. We're going to kind of go through the different folks that are going to be involved in that process. We'll kind of go through how to locate those folks, those forestry professionals. We'll talk a little bit about the importance of contracts. Again, it's going to be kind of an overview. Talking about contracts can be, again, a talk in itself. There's a lot of information. I'm sure you have a lot of questions. I'm going to cover that, but kind of in an overview kind of way. I'm not going to dig in real deep to the contracts. And then we're going to go through some steps for a successful timber sale. There's a brochure called Conducting a Successful Timber Sale. That's out on the internet. The second part of this talk is based on this brochure. On the table, I have a sheet that has the internet link that will help get you to this document. It's a really good resource. So again, just so you know that steps to a successful timber sale is going to be kind of based on this document. So if there's stuff that I didn't answer or you didn't catch, you can get a free copy of this off the internet. All right. So again, kind of digging into the mandatory practice that you guys are required to do. There's a flow. This is kind of the complete process for that mandatory practice. So right now, you guys are at the beginning point. You guys have gotten a letter. You have a practice due either in 2024 or 2025. So just so you know, we can be flexible on those dates, but the bottom line is we would like you to at least have a commitment from a logging or forestry professional to do your job by the end of your due date. So whether it's 2024, at least be in a contract with a forester or a logger by the end of 2024. It doesn't have to be necessarily cut at the end of that year, but at least have someone lined up, who says they will either mark the timber or cut the timber. So
If you're not, is there such a thing as a conservation prison that we go through?
eventually, yes. It's in Russia, but an undisclosed place.
Learn how to cut wood.
There is an enforcement process, which I didn't really plan to talk about. But just so you know, since you asked the question, there is enforcement. But that really happens if I feel like the landowner isn't really doing what they need to do to get the practice accomplished.
That will cost money. Back taxes.
It could cost money. Yep, there could be a citation involved and it could end up in you being withdrawn from the program. So it can get pretty substantial. Don't usually get to that point, but it can be substantial. Yes,
Can we perform the mandatory practice ourselves?
potentially. That would be something you would talk to with your tax law forestry specialist, which if you're in Buffalo County would be me. We really like to see the timber harvested and utilized. So if you've got the ability to do that, then it's not off the table.
If it's just a thinning and it's not really marketable timber.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a logger in there
Yeah.
that they're not making money.
Yep, yeah, and that's certainly something that is an option, and we would just. If it's your case, you would call me and we would walk out there, take a look and kind of determine. Oh, no, he's a hard guy over there. so.
You have to tell me his name. I think it's changed.
It's on the letter.
Yeah, it's on that letter that you got for this thing. All right, so back to this process, I just want to kind of fill in the gaps. So you got a practice due, so you got your letter. So in between, so once you get that letter, you as a landowner need to find someone who's going to be willing to do that practice. And we'll kind of get into the who a little bit later, but you gotta, so in between the practice due and the services accepted, you, the landowner, need to find someone who's willing to do that timber sale, whether it be a forester to market or a logger to cut it. And once you get someone lined up, you would contact your forestry, your tax law forestry specialist and let them know, hey, I got so-and-so, they've committed to do my job. So at that point, we would put you in what's called services accepted, which kind of takes you off the naughty list. So your first responsibility as a landowner is to find someone to do that practice for you. Once you have that person lined up, then you would contact the tax law forester, let them know you've got it. You've got someone lined up to do it. And then that whoever you have to do the timber sale, they will mark the timber, hopefully, get it all set up for a timber harvest. And at that point, you would have to work with that person to submit a cutting notice, which is required to submit prior to you doing any cutting on MFL. So you make sure as a landowner that you know that you have seen and signed and dated a MFL cutting notice before the loggers enter your woods. So once you submit that cutting notice, the tax law forester would look at it and approve that timber sale, and then you're free to cut. So in MFL, once you have completed your logging operation, you are required to report the volumes that you cut off that property, and that is done on what we call a cutting report. So again, once that logging is done, you need to make sure that that volume is reported to your tax law forester on a cutting report. And then once that has been submitted to the tax law forester will go out, look at the site, check the logging, make sure everything was done according to what was required. Once that has been signed off on, then your mandatory practice has been completed. And then on the back side of that, just so you understand, what we are trying to do is once those properties have been cut, a year or two later, the tax law forester or the integrated forester will be visiting that property to do what we call a recon update, just walking and taking measurements in the area that got cut so that we can update your management plan. So that side of things, that wouldn't really be your responsibility, but you know, everything from the completed backwards is you as the landowner's responsibility. So I want to emphasize, and throughout this talk, I hopefully will emphasize that there are going to be people who are going to help you, but in the end, it's you, the landowner's responsibility to make sure that things are kind of follow this process, because we're talking about enforcement from an MFL standpoint, the only people that the tax law folks can hold accountable is the landowner. You tried to do something right, but the logger messed up, I have no recourse with the logger, it's all on the landowner. So it's important for you as the landowner, make sure you understand, what your responsibilities are, what this process is. And in the end, like I said, you are the one who's responsible for whatever happens out there. So again, that's one of the reasons why we're having this talk, because we want you guys to be educated as landowners, to understand, your responsibilities and to understand kind of that process, that MFL, completing a mandatory practice, there is this flow that, that happens with every practice. All right, so you got your letter in the mail. So your first step is to find your management plan. Some of you might have had it written recently. A lot of you might have haven't had it written 20 years ago. But when you get that letter, your first step should be to find your managed forest law plan. If you can't find it, you can contact your tax law forester and they can send you a copy. But that plan is important because it'll show there's a map that goes with that plan. And then there's an actual write-up that that breaks up your property into management units that we call stands. And so the letter that you got will say stand 1 needs this, stand 2 needs this. So you can go to that plan and you can find those stands on the plan, and there'll be more information for each of those areas about how many acres, what exactly are you required to do as far as the cutting. So it's important that you find that plan. Again, you may or may not remember ever seeing it, but that's your first step. Find that plan, make sure you understand what you're looking at as far as what you're required to do. And again, if you can't find that, you can contact your tax law forester and they can get you a copy, no problem. And just, a little bit about that management plan. The hope is that management plan is helping fulfill your goals for that property. The balance with managed forest law is that, managed forest law is a program that people, elect to get into. So the managed forest law program has its purpose, its objective, which is, producing timber products sustainably. And so again, the trick sometimes is to kind of pair MFL's purpose with landowner goals and objectives. They usually mix. Sometimes there's some tension there. So again, it's important for you to understand what you have to do. And if you're like, not sure about this, then you definitely want to call your forester and talk about it. And oftentimes we'll meet out on the property and walk the property and talk about, what you're required to do. But again, this will be your first step. Find that management plan, kind of read through it, make sure you understand. And if you don't, you have questions, then feel free to contact your tax law forester. All right, so the question may be again, well, why do I have to cut? I don't want to cut. One of the initial questions or answers will be, well, you're in the MFL program, so you have to. But there's a reason. Your MFL was written by a forester. The forester who wrote your plan visited your property, walked the property, took data on that property. So they looked at, what's the tree density, what's the age, what are the species, what's going on in the woods, both in the overstory and in the understory. And they use that information and their knowledge of good forest management, and they put that plan together for you, and they put that mandatory practice in place based on that data that they collected off your property. So typically, why we cut timber in a younger stand, it's usually what we call a thinning. It's just to reduce the number of trees per acre so that there's more resources on the property or on that plot of ground, that the trees that are there can grow healthy and vigorously. Oftentimes, the projects that you have to do, the mandatory practices, are going to be in a forest stand that's dominated by mature timber. That's most of our practices are more what we call regeneration practices. They're practices that are taking place in a forest stand that the majority of the trees are old. They're mature. They're not increasing in vigor. They're not increasing in growth very much. And it's time to cut those trees and regenerate new new growth in that forest. So again, that's kind of the general, why do you have to cut? And again, we want you to cut for a reason, it's not that, oh, you're in the program, you just have to cut, again, there is science behind that, there is a method to the madness. And again, if you're not understanding, why or the what, make sure that you talk to your tax law forester, about, the practice and what that looks like. Is there any flexibility? But again, just keep in mind that what you're required to do is based on data that was collected, and it's based on, good sound forest management. And again, just a quick overview of that. I do a whole talk on, logging and why you do what you do as far as forest management. So just wanted to cover that real briefly. All right, and then, well, this is kind of in combination with that, you have to cut, there's a reason why we're cutting, but there's benefits to the cutting as well. You're improving forest health, you're improving forest productivity. In the end, you will be improving aesthetics. You will definitely be improving wildlife habitat. Any kind of logging that you do, especially good logging, is going to benefit some kind of wildlife species. Wildlife management and logging go hand in hand. Most folks, typically want to manage for deer. Logging produces good deer habitat. You get understory growth because of the extra sunlight. So logging definitely will improve wildlife habitat. It will improve aesthetics. I get it. Sometimes when you log, it looks like a bomb went off. So you wonder, well, aesthetically, this doesn't look nice. But one thing you have to keep in mind with forestry is managing trees is a long-term endeavor. It's not a microwave type of thing. It's long-term. So a lot of the benefits that you get from a timber harvest are on that long-term scale. You'll see increases in productivity, but it takes place 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. Oops. You'll see benefits in wildlife habitat. You'll see, and you got to do it for other people too.
For the next guy.
Yeah, it's always a hard conversation to say, someone asks me, well, why do I have to do this? Well, in 15, 20 years, this is what's going to happen. And most people are like, well, I'm not going to be here in 15, 20 years. And I think, hopefully I won't either, but still, I mean, that's the idea behind forestry. As a forester, I have to be thinking long-term, as a forester, when we're doing the work that we do, we're always thinking about the future, What we do can benefit you as the landowner here and now. When you manage properly, you're going to get good economic benefits from that. You're going to get good short-term benefits. But again, a lot of these benefits are also long-term. It may not be aesthetically pleasing right after the logging job, but a couple of years after, the forest recovers and you get new growth, hopefully, you find it aesthetically pleasing. So a lot of different benefits to timber harvesting. But again, I do try to encourage folks, don't be focused just on the short term. A lot of what we're doing in the woods is long term, and it is for future generations. What you guys in your woods are enjoying right now, you didn't create it. Somebody else created it, good or bad. Somebody else put it in that situation for you. So. All right, so I'm going to kind of get into the roles of the different folks who are going to kind of be a part of your implementation of your mandatory practice. So obviously, the first role we're going to talk about is landowner role. Like I said before, landowners, you are the ones that we, the MFL folks, hold responsible. You guys are ultimately responsible for what takes place on your managed forest law land. So just that first point, timely establishment of your practices. Again, it's your responsibility to kind of keep that flow happening. In most cases, you're going to find someone and that person is going to take the reins. So in most cases, it's not going to be you guys kind of dragging weights behind you. Once you find someone to help you, the pressure is going to be pretty much off of you. But again, that's not always the case. And again, I just want to emphasize that in the end, it's your responsibility to make sure things are getting done and things are getting done in a timely manner. Sometimes you just might need to light a fire under whoever's said they're gonna do your practice, so. Sometimes it just takes time, and again, your tax law forester will understand, if it's taken a while to get someone interested in your job, but again, it is your responsibility to keep things flowing in a relatively timely manner. So as a tax law forester, I can't help landowners hire somebody. I can't set you up with a logger. I can't set you up with a forester. So it is your responsibility to make those contacts, to find out, who to call, who to hire. Your tax law foresters have lists of foresters and loggers that we can give to you, that you can use to make those contacts. But the tax law foresters can't help you with that. We can't line things up for you. So again, that's gonna be your
Are
responsibility.
you saying you can give me a list of so many people and get a hold of one?
We can give you a list and you can make calls.
Oh, that's all, maybe.
So again, kind of just touching on that county and DNR cutting notice, I'll talk about that a little bit more, but again, just reiterating that, if you're in this process and you got someone lined up and the logger calls you, hey, I'm coming out there tomorrow, just be aware. Have I seen a county cutting notice? Have I seen an MFL cutting notice? And if the answer is no, you gotta tell them, hey, hang on, we need to get this cutting notice kind of situated. So again, that if someone comes onto your property and starts cutting and you don't have a cutting notice, that is a citable offense. You can get a citation, and that citation is going to go to the landowner. So again, we don't usually go there, but it is your responsibility, and it helps me when landowners understand that, when the landowner knows that, hey, this is my responsibility, and holds the people that you're working with accountable, because it does happen a lot where loggers are getting ready to move on to a site and I haven't seen a cutting notice. So again, from my side of things, that's why I've invited you guys here, because I need your guys' help, because I can't wrangle everybody. Yes.
Okay, we hire a forester and they prepare what's supposed to be done. Do you have to sign off on the cutting notice or just have notice of it?
That's a good question. The way the law works right now is if you're working with someone who has 5 or more years of experience in the woods, that's pretty much the definition. Statutorily, I don't, as the tax law forester, I don't necessarily have approval authority on that cutting notice. On that cutting notice, and I'll show you a little bit later, but on that cutting notice, there's a question for the landowner. Do you want the tax law forester to approve this? Yes or no? And you have to check yes or no. And if you're working with someone who, let's say, is a cooperating forester, and you trust them and you feel like they're fully capable, then you can check no. And then I don't have the authority to go out and check the marking, and to look at things prior to cutting. If you check yes, then that gives me the authority to check it. So this rule, I think, was in 2017, this came about. Prior to that, we checked everything. There was a requirement that we approved everything that got done. So now you have your option, depending on who you're working with. Just a caveat to that, we always check timber sales after they've been cut. So if you check, no, I don't want DNR approval, I will be coming out after the fact. And if it didn't get cut according to the plan or didn't get cut right, then that'll be on you, the landowner, to deal with the consequences. So.
If we did check yes, what type of a time lag are we looking at?
So again, a good question. By law, those cutting notices have to be submitted to the tax law forester at least 30 days prior to cutting being started. So that's the statutory law. So at least 30 days. So hopefully I'll get out there sooner than that, but that's by law, it has to be in 30 days prior to that. Yeah.
As we've done this, we've hired consulting foresters. You're seeing that the landowner himself actually has to check the thing on the box in the thing, or does, I always went under the assumption that our forester was doing that.
Well, that's up to you. I mean, it's the landowner's choice. So, I mean, if you give.
I mean, it's not that I have to, but if my forester fills out the cutting notice, that's okay.
Yes, oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, and they did.
So on that cutting notice, where it says for your signature and date, it says landowner or authorized representative.
Oh.
So if you're working with a cooperating forester and you say, hey, you can sign this for me. If you give them that permission, then they can sign that cutting notice for you.
Probably.
There, but that question is still there. Do you want landowner or tax law approval? Yes or no? I mean, we would like to see the landowner check that. But if you give your consultant the permission to check it, then
And
they can
usually
do it.
that's part of that contract that we have with them.
Can be, yeah. I mean, that's, you're gonna, so my point is, so you, the landowner, understand that that's there. So you, as a landowner, understand there's a spot on that cutting notice that says, do you want DNR approval? Yes or no? And there is a place there where you need to sign and date. So as long as you understand that, and whoever you're working with, you can give them permission to check that box for you or to sign that cutting notice for you. As long as you understand that that's there, because, you know, a case could be where you have no idea that stuff is there, you're working with somebody, they check that box for you, they sign that cutting notice for you. But things, problems happen, and I come to you and I say, hey, look, this didn't work out, and you're like, oh, I didn't sign that cutting notice, I didn't check that box, you know, so again, just the education of the landowners involved, so that you know that that is on that cutting notice, and either you need to check it and sign it, or you need to be giving people the permission to do so. All right, yeah,
Are these forms available on the DNR site?
So when you look at it for approval, are you looking, comparing the cutting notice to the plan?
Yeah.
Essentially, that's what you're doing?
Yep.
Okay.
yeah, and again, the cutting notice, and I do have a slide on that that's coming up later, but you don't have to have approval, but there is a caveat to that too. If you're working with a forester and they've set up the timber sales in a way that is completely different than the plan, then I do have authority to approve it. If what you're doing on the property differs from what the plan is calling for, then I do have the authority to go look. So if you're following the plan, you know, plan says, you know, group selection on 15 acres, that's what you're doing. Then, yeah, everything would be fine. But yes, the form is on the end.
So,
All right, where am I at here? All right, so kind of just touching a little bit on the timber sale process, the good, you know, forest management process. We like to think of it as a three-legged stool with, again, you, the landowner who owns the land, has your land in the managed forest law program. So everything starts with you. And then the two legs of the stool would be forestry professionals, what we'd call foresters, private foresters, and then timber producers. So the ideal system would be for all three to be kind of in place. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. But landowner would hire a forestry professional, and then through that forestry professional, you would find a timber producer, which would be a logger. So those three folks would work together to get your timber harvested, essentially. So, yeah, so oftentimes in Buffalo County, unfortunately, there may not be a forestry professional. You may be working with a timber producer, you know, that can work, and especially when, you know, you're in MFL and there's a plan in place and there's tax law forester who's kind of, you know, looking over things. You know, the one leg can be missing, but again, you have less problems, less issues if you have all three kind of, you know, working together. We'll kind of get
Does
into that.
the forester commonly find the logger?
Yes, yep. Well, you can do it both ways, but that's in the ideal situation. Landowner hires a forester, they will mark the timber. You will work with them to find it, and they will kind of help you through that process. So like in the beginning, I mentioned, you know, you're the landowner, these are your responsibilities, but like if you hired a forester, they're gonna set up the timber sale, they're gonna probably put together a contract, they're gonna help you find a logger. They're gonna fill out the cutting notice for you, so you have responsibility ultimately, but if you hire a forester, a lot of that pressure is gonna be taken off of your back, because they're gonna do a lot of those steps for you. So, so like I said, we talked about landowner, responsibilities. So you got your letter, you have a mandatory practice, look at your plan, that'd be step one. Step two, and this isn't, an absolute, but we have it here. Step two would be to contact your tax law forester. If you got a logger or you got a forester you're working with, you don't really have to contact the tax law forester, but if you get this letter, you've never done a timber sale before, you've never done a mandatory practice before, you can contact your tax law forester and they can kind of help educate you on, and this is what you got to do, this is where, these are the steps that you can take. Again, you don't ultimately have to contact the tax law forester right away, but we are here for you to help you out. Just so you understand the tax law forester's role, again, we're not able to administer a timber sale for you. You have to do that through a private forester or a logger. We administer the tax law program, so my position is to make sure properties get cut according to their plans and in a timely manner. I do the approval of the tax or the cutting notice, the cutting report. I try to get on active sales on MFL just to make sure things are going well. I check the properties after they're cut. So I administer, all the parts of the managed forest law program. Always here for you if you have questions or you have problems, but again, we are not able to administer that sale for you. We are not able to tell you who you should use as far as a logger or a forester. We have lists, but that's as far as we can go. Can't give you any kind of legal advice. So again, on the flip side, if you hire a forester, they can tell you, hey, I've worked with this person, they're no good. They can give you legal advice. They can help you write out a contract, that kind of stuff. But tax law foresters are not able to do that kind of thing.
But you used to be able to,
Oh,
30 years ago.
maybe.
Ed Godell wrote a plan up for us and said, here we go.
Yeah. What we do now is a lot different than what we used to do. Maybe what we used to do, maybe even we weren't supposed to, but I don't know. But we used to be more involved, yeah. Now we're not. So next step is, like I said, to work with a cooperating forester. So cooperating forester is a private forester, and we use the word cooperating. So in the state of Wisconsin, we have a cooperating forester program. So there are private foresters who can sign an agreement with the DNR that says, hey, we're going to practice sustainable forestry. We're going to follow all the rules of the state. It's a long agreement about, doing things the right way. So a cooperating forester would be a private forester who signed an agreement with the DNR that ensures that they're going to follow, good forest management standards, ethical standards. We do have a list of those folks on the internet, which I will show you here in the next slide. There could be private foresters out there who are not cooperators. So just, keep that in mind that if you want someone who has signed that agreement with the DNR, it's another kind of a quality check. You can ask foresters that you talk to, hey, are you a cooperating forester with the state of Wisconsin, DNR? But cooperating foresters are private foresters, and again, they're the ones who can mark your timber. They can write up a contract for you. They can put together what we call a bid prospectus, where they estimate volume. They can mail that out to loggers. They can help you decide which logging company to use. Again, they can give you all sorts of advice. So that is what we encourage folks to use. We encourage folks to use a forester. Doesn't always happen, for whatever reason, a lot of folks tend to use, loggers directly and don't use a cooperating forester, but this is kind of our the DNR's recommendation is to try to get a forester out there. You can hire a forester to do everything, mark your timber, put it out for bid, help you hire a logger, administer the sale. So you can hire them to do everything, but you can also hire them just to mark the timber sale. So you can hire them to come out, put paint on the trees, kind of put boundaries around the area that you want logged. And then from there, you can take it to loggers, and market it yourself. So you don't have to hire a forester to do everything. You could at least hire them to do marketing, and that would be your decision as a landowner. What direction you want to go. Again, it's nice to have someone who can be honest with you and answer questions that, the tax law forester can't answer. But again, there's a lot of different scenarios out there. So again, it's your choice what you want to do. We don't mandate that you work with a forester. We just encourage you to do it. Yes,
Bottom line, what is it gonna cost?
good question. You ask them. Call them and ask them. Frankly, I don't have a good feeling for costs. I don't really get to hear that really much. So what we encourage folks is just to call some of these foresters and ask, what is it gonna cost? And what I tell folks is, yeah, it's gonna cost you more than if you didn't use one. But there are a lot of benefits to using one, both financially and non-financially. Again, there's a right way and a wrong way to cut timber, and then there's a middle way. And, a lot of our woods gets cut kind of the middle way, and it's, if you use a forester, you hopefully can get your property cut in a good way, not a sustainable way.
So how much more does the forester take on liability then? If he's providing a service for that, it gives you a break between you and the DNR, because he is the one mandating it.
In the end, if things hit the fan, you're the one who's gonna be ultimately responsible. Also, obviously, things hit the fan and the forester you hired dropped the ball. There's civil recourse there, but again, it's a good place to emphasize it. The landowner is ultimately responsible, but I would tell you 9.8 times out of 10 or 9.9 times out of 10, it's going to be a benefit, to be using them. It's going to cost you a little bit more, yes, but again, I think the benefits are going to far outweigh that cost. And a lot of times you probably would make more if you use the forester, the way they market and help you find the right person who's got good utilization. It could actually help you make more money. Yes.
Probably after everything's all said and done, the most important thing you can do is have a current copy of the logger's workman's comp.
Yeah, and again, that if you're not working with a forester, that's a good question to be asking. Hopefully the forester will be getting that, but yeah, there's a lot we can talk about, as far as doing a timber sale. Again, this is gonna be kind of an overview. We can have a whole talk about what to be looking for, and we're gonna cover that a little bit later here. But yes, there are a lot of things, that you need to be asking. And if you're not working with a forester, it's just gonna complicate things, because the forester will know the right questions to ask, et cetera. But, yeah, in the end, it's always, I'll leave it at this, it's always a good thing to have your timber marked, whether it be by a forester or by the log buyer, by somebody. It's always a good thing to get it marked, because then everybody who's in the process understands what's happening. The tax law forester understands what's getting cut, what's being left. The loggers understand what's supposed to be cut, what's supposed to be left. You, the landowner, understand what's gonna get cut, what's gonna get left. So it's always highly recommended that you get your woods marked before, with paint. Trees that are gonna get cut, get marked with some paint. We encourage you to use a forester, but the bottom line is, if you can get your timber marked, it's huge. It's super important. It helps eliminate a lot of ambiguity when you're moving forward with the timber sale. All right. So just a little talk about where you can find these cooperating foresters. So this is just going to be a list of foresters, cooperating foresters, not loggers, just foresters. So on the DNR website, so you can go to the DNR website, and on the little search button, you can just type in forestry locator. Pull up forestry locator. But then you can kind of see, this isn't the whole screen, but at the top here, you can click the county that you're looking for. Then after that, you can select what you're looking for. So any forester, DNR forester, tax law forester, or a cooperating forester. So again, if you're looking, I've already talked to my tax law forester. I need a cooperating forester to hire. So you can just click that bottom button. Then down below, there's some other questions that you can click, as far as what do you want this forester to be able to do? But then at the bottom, you just press search, and it'll bring up a list of all the foresters who said that they would mark timber and administer a sale in Buffalo County or Trempealeau County, whichever county you select. That'll bring up a big long list of folks that have told the DNR that, yeah, we will do work here in this county. So that's one way that you can find foresters who can help you out. Then you can just make some calls based off of, whatever your criteria may be, location or whatever. But, it's a good resource for you, the landowner, to kind of to start that process, finding a forester. Okay, so we talked about landowners, your role, we talked about tax law forester, we talked about cooperating foresters. And then the last leg there would be the loggers, the timber producers. Obviously they're the ones who are gonna do the hard work. So oftentimes, like I said, if you're working with a forester, they're gonna have a line on, who you should be contacting. But if you're not working with a forester, your tax law forester in your county would have a list of loggers in that county who typically do work in that county. So if you're looking to go straight to a logger, you can get a list from your county tax law forester. Like I said, the loggers are super important because they're going to actually do the work. So things to keep in mind, and again, working with a forester or working directly with a logger, you want to make sure that the logger that you're hiring understands clearly what they're being asked to do. What kind of cutting techniques, how many acres. You want to make sure that that logger understands what they're signing up for, basically. There has, in the past, there's been a lot of, landowners who don't really know what they're doing. They know a logger, and they just say, hey, I got MFL, will you cut it? The logger shows up, and then they talk to me and they realize, oh, this wasn't really what I was expecting, and so it's important for you, again, as a landowner, to oversee that the logger that you're hiring both understands, the type of cutting they're doing and how, what they're going to be expected to do, and that they're willing to do it. Loggers are the ones who are going to be obviously cutting the wood. There's a variety of folks out there, and a huge part of doing your logging job is utilization. In a lot of our forest management practices, you're going to have different types of wood products. You're going to have pulp, you're going to have bolts, you're going to have saw logs, you're going to have veneer. But not every logger is created equally as far as how they're able to utilize that material. So again, it's important that you're selecting a logger that is going to fit your job. So let's say if you're doing a clear cut and there's a lot of pulp and there's a lot of bolts, again, you want to make sure that the logger you're considering understands that, and you want to be checking with that logger, because they can say, yeah, I'll do it. And then you can ask, well, okay, do you have a market for pulp? Do you have a market for bolts? Do you have a market for saw logs? Everybody has a market for saw logs, but there's a lot of folks who don't have the ability to move pulp. There's a lot of guys who don't move bolts. So they might be willing to do your job, but they might say, no, I'm going to take, everything that's 12 inches and up, I'm gonna sell, and the rest is gonna lay in the woods. There's nothing inherent, that's not necessarily wrong, but if you're talking to this one logger, then you call this other logger and they tell you, well, yeah, I can move pulp, I can move bolts, I can move saw logs. You're gonna get better utilization and you're gonna get more money for that timber sale. So it's important, again, that when you're talking to loggers, that you understand, what kind of practice are you on the hook to do? Make sure that that logger is willing and understands, again, that practice that you have to do, understands, the scale of that practice, hey, if you got a 5 acre clear cut, that's no big deal. If you got a 30 acre clear cut, well, that's a little different story. So again, you got to make sure that you're being very communicative with that logger, make sure that they understand the practices. And again, you as a landowner want to be asking those questions about utilization. What can you use? What are you able to sell? What's going to be left in the woods?
Should your cooperating forester know this?
Yep, so just as you as the landowner, just so that you're aware, if you're working with a forester, that forester is gonna be having that conversation with you, like, okay. And a lot of times they're gonna send out bids, and the bid's gonna say, we're clear cutting this, we're select cutting this. And they're gonna ask for bids a lot of times by product, by pulp, by bolts, by saw logs. So, if loggers are bidding on that project, then you're gonna see that on paper. So, yes, if you're working with a forester, they should be covering all of that for you.
Yeah.
This is just kind of more in that case. If you're talking to a logger directly, just understand that.
Will they give you an idea of what the grading is in your area? Like, it happened with us before where the logger goes, well, you need to come over here and grade these logs. And I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Grading logs.
That'd be an odd situation, but yeah, all logs that you cut usually are gonna get graded in most cases. Even if you're working with a forester, the forester may or may not be the one grading. That doesn't happen a lot anymore, but it can. It just depends on how you set up the timber sale, which again, we're gonna kind of get into a little bit later, but yeah, that's an important question to be asking. And again, if you're working with a forester, this is gonna be covered. They're gonna take care of that in the conversation they have with the logger. So if you're not working with a forester, this becomes more critical, because you as the landowner now have to be asking these questions. How are you grading is it lump sum? Are you grading different grades out? How are you paying me? How are you gonna pay me for this wood? How are you utilizing this wood? Those are, again, questions that as a landowner, you should have a general understanding, moving into this process. But if you're not working with a forester, it's gonna be imperative that you understand that you should be asking these questions.
So there's a big difference in price between the saw log and the pier log.
So again, if you have a forester, they're gonna help you out with that immensely, but you as a landowner still should be asking the forester, hey, how are we gonna deal with these different products, So again, the purpose of this talk is for you to understand that kind of stuff exists out there, that you can be a more educated landowner when you're talking to a forester, in this process. When they start talking to you about bolts and pulp, then you understand, okay, yeah, I get it, that there's different utilization out there, there's different markets. So, and I understand. So again, if you work with a forester, they're gonna help you out with this, but if you're not, then these are questions you really need to be asking. All right. Just one more kind of point on this. Loggers oftentimes are gonna be the ones constructing roads, and skid trails, and again, we're gonna talk about that a little bit. But oftentimes, they're gonna be the ones who are gonna maybe say, hey, we need to put a road in here, or if you need a road, they're gonna be the ones that are probably gonna be doing that. Again, you wanna make sure that they're capable of doing that, they have the equipment, and that they understand, the right way and the wrong way to put those roads in. So we'll talk about that a little bit more with the contract. Have a question slide here. You guys have already asked questions, but any questions on what we talked about?
Yeah, Brent, as far as does the MFL program have any mandates on loggers that you hire, such as like insurance or experience, anything like that?
Yeah, we can't control that. We encourage you shouldn't hire someone who doesn't have liability insurance. So we can't mandate who you use. Like this gentleman's question was, can a landowner do it? He could. We don't mandate who does it. We just mandate how it gets done. It has to be done the right way. And again, the main focus of the MFL program is to produce forest products. So again, we don't care who's doing it, we mandate how it gets done, and we really want to see that product utilized. So that's, where MFL stops. Again, if you want to use your neighbor or use, someone from Cable, Wisconsin, or from Iowa, we can't say that. We don't control that, we just control, how it gets cut. We just want to make sure it gets cut the right way. Any other questions? Yes.
See, you didn't mention, the water quality stuff, but, how are these guys dealing with invasive species transport?
Well, that's a good question. Again, we can't necessarily. We don't have a lot of control over them on that. And so on your cutting notice, we're gonna talk about, so on that cutting notice, when you're filling that out, we're gonna talk about, there's a spot on there that you talk about invasive species. There's gonna be, what you're required to do as a landowner. And oftentimes it is, the recommendation is, if it's garlic mustard, the recommendation is logging equipment should be cleaned before going to another site. But I don't really have the ability to force people to do that, the logger to do that. So as you, the landowner, again, if you know and understand that, you should be encouraging that logger to clean their equipment. You have a place, maybe they can clean it on your property. But for you as the landowner and MFL, we just want to make sure that the way we're cutting, season or the type, we want to make sure that the way we're cutting your property isn't encouraging the spread of the invasive species as best we can. So that's, again, it all kind of lies on the landowner, and our main focus is to make sure we're not doing something on your property, on the MFL property, that's gonna make the invasive species problem worse. Again, we encourage loggers to clean their machinery, but you can't pull them over on the side of the road if they left your property and then clean the machinery. You don't have the authority to do that, so. But again, you as the landowner, if you can be educated and encourage these guys, hey, I know I got garlic mustard, you really should wash your
I'm
machine.
more worried about it coming in, because
Oh.
the city is about not
Well,
getting it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a good point. You as the landowner could, stop them at the door and say, hey, inspect their machinery. You have that right to inspect their machinery and if it's full of mud. Say, hey, come over to the shed over here, let's spray this machine off, so. Again, we aren't able to necessarily regulate that. Can't regulate where they're going with those machines. All we can do is say, hey, you really should be washing this machinery, but you as a landowner have the ability to say, hey, you gotta clean this machine before you come in. And which means,
Money to do it for aquatic invasives.
we're not really, but that's state waters, and but again, we encourage folks. And again, it's your property, take ownership of it, and that's what we encourage. And if you're worried about that, I'd say definitely have a conversation with that logger before they show up and say, hey, I'm really concerned about this.
Something to put right in the contract.
You could, you absolutely could. That's your choice, and we would encourage you to do so. And again, we'll talk about contracts later. That's, again, an important thing to consider in a contract. Yes.
Right, I was just gonna make a comment that sometimes it's good to know if your neighbors have to cut too, because John and I are neighbors and we have pine. So it's harder to get some loggers interested in smaller parcels, but like Bob, he's got something to do too. Then it's easier to network and get a logger to come into the area and do a bunch.
Yes.
Same time.
And sometimes the tax law enforcer can help you with that too, if we know what's scheduled in the area oftentimes, and we can help. Like if you don't know your neighbor and you got a small parcel to cut, you can call your tax law enforcement and say, hey, is there anybody else in the area that's scheduled to cut? Can you let me know? We definitely can do that for you. All right. And ask a lot of questions. All right, So, so step 4 is get it in writing. So this is kind of that contract. And like I said, I'm just gonna cover this in a little bit of an overview. This is a full talk in itself. There's a lot of things to cover in a contract. So again, unfortunately, I can't cover it all here, but number one, want to bring it up so you know you should have a contract. However you're going about selling your wood, you definitely should have a contract with that logger. And again, that contract should spell out, things like, how are you getting paid? When are you getting paid? It should spell out the work that you are expecting that logger to do, whether it be clear cuts or let's say your timber sale is marked, that timber sale contract should spell out you, the logger, are required to cut all marked trees. If there's gonna be compensation involved with that, that should be spelled out in the contract. Who's gonna fix the roads and the landings after the sale is done? That's an important one. There's oftentimes where I talk to landowners and they're like, I have no idea. We never talked about it, and the loggers are leaving today and the roads are a mess. So contract should definitely spell out, who's responsible to fix the roads and the landings. If you're landing in your neighbor's field or your field, the contract should spell out who's required to clean the field, after the logging job is done. It should, again, there's a lot of things you can include. If you're worried about invasive species, you absolutely can put a clause in that contract that says, your machinery needs to be cleaned before you come to my property. So again, there's a lot of things that you can put in this contract. The important thing is that you have a contract. If you don't have a contract, something goes wrong, there really isn't a whole lot that you can do. Even in someone knows the legal system, but there isn't a lot you can do in the legal
An
system.
oral
There's no
contract isn't worth the paper it's written.
Right. Yeah. Yes,
And it's been difficult to get loggers in years past.
yeah,
And the more complex stuff you put into that contract, the more they're looking the other way.
yeah.
Has it been improving?
No, I don't, I think it's gonna get worse before it gets better. But in my mind, it's not an excuse to not do things the right way. It's just gonna add a level of frustration to folks, because you might get the timber marked and you can't find a logger. It might take you 4 years to find someone. That's not gonna be, expect that, it's not an, and again, if you're an MFL and you're under this deadline, you could talk to your tax law forester, and we understand what the climate is on the logging side of things, and we can work with you, if you got things lined out, but you can't find someone to cut it, we have flexibility to work with you.
I mean, we saw the pictures of the timber harvesters. But a lot of Buffalo County, you got to stand on your hind legs on the hillside.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have a picture of the right machine coming up, so.
okay.
But yeah, so yes, loggers can be very, very picky right now as far as what jobs they do. Because there aren't very many loggers right now. And it is complicating, my life, and trying to get things done, for tax law, because there's a lot in the county that needs to get cut. But like I said, that doesn't change the ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is to do things the right way. Both from a forest management standpoint, but as you, the landowner, you don't want to compromise the health of your forest or, get erosion on your property because you couldn't find a logger who's willing to do things the right way. And obviously, we don't want to make those compromises. So just understand, if you're going to do things the right way, it might take you twice as long, maybe 3 times as long to find someone. There are still guys out there who will do the right thing. It's tough right now, so you might just be waiting a while. So, yes.
Just as for what it's worth, over the last roughly 25 years, there's been a huge decline in not only in loggers, but also in mills. A lot of that has to do with the state of Wisconsin changing the requirements for independent contractors. And all of a sudden, these loggers, I gotta buy a workman's comp, and I've got to pay $1 in premium for every dollar worth of salary I pay. So it's gotten really difficult on those guys too.
Yes, yeah, it is a tough occupation, especially in Oakland County, if you're not running a machine. If you're a hand cutter, insurance is killing guys. There's a lot of, so again, there's a lot going into, the lack of loggers right now. It's a tough world out there right now, you know, insurance wise. Seasonal restrictions on logging, deer hunting restrictions on logging, weather has just been awful. So, yeah, it's a tough, you know, I have sympathy for loggers. I mean, it's been tough for those guys, especially again in the coulee country here where you're not running in a machine. So I have sympathy for them. At the same time, you know, we still got to make sure things are done right. But yeah, it's, and I don't see things getting better. I see things getting maybe worse for a little bit, but we'll see. Yeah, yes.
So you touched on something there saying, okay, you've had the forester come in, mark the trees. But you can't get a logger in there for 4 years. What if my cutoff date is 2 years?
An update for,
So I've got the forester in there. From the time I've got him in, it's 2 years till it's supposed to be done by. But I can't get the logger in there for 4 years. You can work with that or?
oh yeah.
Okay.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, next law foresters, you know, especially if it's marked, you got a forester, they mark the timber, I've seen it. Yeah, we understand the situation in the logging world and yeah, we definitely, as long as we know, again, that we, the landowner, yeah, I'm trying to get this done, you know, if it's the case where you hired them, you know, got paint on the trees and you thought, hey, you know, now I can just kind of sit back and not do anything, you know, eventually we'll figure that out.
Right.
Then you'll be in trouble, but if I know that you're working at it, you know, we understand the situation and definitely can work with you on time.
Well, listening to these guys, obviously, they've been in it a long time where we've only been in it 2 years, so it's a learning process.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Again, that's the purpose of this talk. And again, there's so much more we can talk about. And again, don't hesitate to call the tax law forester and talk more about anything you got questions on.
The county guy,
Yes. Is there in Trumbull County? Yeah,
is in the,
my counterpart. All right, so let me just make sure we covered everything here. So again, like I said, we're not gonna go in depth here, other than make sure you have a contract. If you're working with a forester, they're gonna help you with that. Again, if you're not working with a forester, you know, you can call your tax law forester and say, hey, I'm working with this logger, I'm putting together a contract. What kind of things should I have in there? Again, we can give you general ideas about what you should have in there, but again, make sure you have a contract, it's super important. Because again, you know, the handshake just doesn't work, in the legal system, unfortunately. All right, so, I want to touch on this here, non-merchantable trees and invasive species. This is kind of an aside. I have, you know, Dennis Reimers and Josh Rasmussen are here. They're going to give a talk here after I talk about kind of this particular topic, cost sharing involved with this. But what I want to talk about, kind of what Mark brought up, kind of leads into this well, is the logging industry right now is hurting. There's not a lot of cutters. So they can be very picky right now. Getting hard for them to do things, or it's getting hard to get them to do things we used to be able to get them to do in the past. In MFL, a lot of our practices are clear cuts, or, you know, any kind of project that we do oftentimes has trees that need to get cut that aren't saw logs. So again, this is going to kind of go in with merchantability, but in clear cuts in particular, it's getting really hard to get loggers to cut, you know, what they call, well, what would be non-merchantable species, you know, something that's, so in our clear cuts, when you do a clear cut, our cutting spec is cut everything 2 inches in diameter and greater. And so a lot of times it's getting hard to get the loggers willing to cut something they can't utilize. But you're still required to do it as a landowner. So what we're starting to see with you know, the lack of loggers is you have a clear cut to do, the logger's not willing to do everything. Or they're willing to do everything, but they want compensation for it, which we fully support. You know, if your logger's gonna do a clear cut, somebody's gotta cut that non-merchantable material. It's either gonna be them or it's gonna be you, the landowner. For most landowners, it just works to have the logger do it. So, you know, I fully support the loggers charging to do that. So in line with that, there are cost share programs out there that can help cover those costs, and Josh and Dennis are gonna talk about those after I'm done. But I just wanted to bring your guys' attention to the fact that it, you know, that is quite often gonna be a component of your mandatory practices. It might be material in there that the loggers don't wanna cut, or want money to do it. Especially if you're, or even if you're working with a forester, you know, they're gonna mark a timber sale, they're gonna have smaller diameter trees marked. Logger doesn't have the ability to utilize that, they're still required to cut those trees down. So, again, kind of bringing in the conversation with talking to the logger, having a contract in place. You, the landowner, if you're working with a forester and the logger, need to come together and have a conversation and have an agreement. Who's going to do the non-commercial work? You know, who's gonna cut, you know, the non-merchantable stuff in the TSI or in the clear cut? If you have buckthorn, or ironwood or some invasive plant in your woods that needs to get cut down, you know, are the loggers willing to do it, or are you gonna do it? You know, having the conversation with those loggers, having an understanding of who's gonna be required to do what, and that needs to be spelled out in your contract. And again, it's getting harder to get loggers to do that, so you as a landowner might have to find an alternative, you know, to find someone else, whether it be yourself or somebody else you hire to cut the invasives or to cut the non-merchantable material. So again, just want to bring your guys' attention to the fact that it's becoming more of an issue on these timber sales. And again, you as a landowner are going to have to figure out how to accomplish that non-commercial work. And again, whether it be hiring the logger to do it or doing it yourself. But again, I want to bring your guys' attention to the fact that you're moving forward, you might have to deal with this scenario on your project. Again, we'll talk about some resources to help do that here in a little bit. Any questions on that? All right. So I got kind of running out of time here, but here's the MFL cutting notice. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, because usually you'll have hopefully somebody to help you out, and when the time comes, you can always ask me. But the cutting notice, so on the right-hand side here is the MFL cutting notice. On the left-hand side is the county cutting notice. I haven't talked about that yet, but just bear in mind that it is a state law that anybody, whether you're an MFL or not, anybody who's gonna cut timber in the state of Wisconsin, they're required to file a county cutting notice. That has to be filed with the county clerk at least 15 days prior to any timber sale being started. So there are two cutting notices that you are responsible for. One is the county one, which is a state law for anybody. And then the next one is the MFL cutting notice, which is required only for folks in the managed forest law program. So the right-hand form, that's the form that gets sent to the tax law forester. It's can be kind of complicated. There's a lot of parts to it. Again, I won't go into detail, but this is, I think you guys can see it, but this is kind of what it looks like. There's a place for landowner information. There's a place we have to track endangered resources. We have to track archaeological hits. Your tax law forester or your cooperating forester can find out that information. There's information about, you know, creating roads, you know, monitoring wetlands. You know, just, you have to put in that cutting notice if you've got a stream crossing or a swamp or a ditch you're crossing, you got to spell out in that cutting notice how you're going to deal with that properly. So there's a lot of detail that goes into this cutting notice. It would be kind of complicated for a landowner to do it on their own. We'll recognize that. So there's parts that a landowner could do, but then you're going to need help either from a forester or potentially your tax law forester.
The county cutting notice gets filed with the clerk.
Yep. Yep.
But the MFL one goes to you.
Those are the tax law forester.
Right.
Yep. Yep, 15 days, 30 days. Yeah.
Since the county one has been brought up, this is for my own professional edification. I have a number of clients who will be renting land and they're eradicating old ancient fence lines. That are grown up. Does that require notice?
I don't know the statute specifically. I just know that if you're cutting trees and selling them, you're required.
These are being cut and burned.
Oh, yeah, then I would say no. If this has to do with tax delinquent land. Because when you submit that county notice to the county clerk looks at it, the county treasurer looks at it, and she has to make sure that there's no tax delinquency on that land. It's weird, you probably know the law, but the law is if you're a tax delinquent on your property, you can't cut it. You can't do a merchantable harvest. It's kind of weird, but you know, they're making sure that you're not
You have to
making.
pay the tax.
Right.
Right.
That's if they want to do that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't want to get, into that too much, but yeah, just bear in mind that there are two cutting notices out there. One's county, one's MFL. My concern is the MFL one, so. And again, just you as a landowner, be aware, again, if the loggers are getting ready to move out on your property and you haven't seen a cutting notice, an MFL cutting notice, say timeout and start asking questions and what that.
Is that something customarily we would sign when we contract with the forester?
You wouldn't, usually if you contract with a forester, oftentimes they'll set up the timber sale and then put the cutting notice together. So it'd be you hire a forester, they set up the timber sale. Once they've set it up, then they'll produce that cutting notice. Would be after that. And then real quick, this is the cutting report. So again, after the job has been completed, all the logs have been sold. You as the landowner are required to file a cutting report, which again, you just list the species, the product, and then the total volume that was cut off the property. Again, the forester and the loggers can help you with that oftentimes, but again, it's your responsibility to make sure that's submitted. If you're left high and dry and you need help, tax law foresters can help you with that. But when you are doing your logging, oftentimes you're getting paid, and when you get a check, you get a mill slip. This check is for this amount of volume. You just keep all those mill slips in one pile, because that's what you'll need to fill this form out. Those slips will tell you, hopefully it'll be broke down by species and product. Oftentimes it's by grade, so it's a little bit more lengthy than what we're asking for, but when you're cutting timber, just make sure you keep those logging slips that show the volume you're getting paid for.
What's volume? Number of trees?
It could be cords for pulp, it could be tons, if a lot of pulp is sold by the ton, but usually it's cords or board feet per 1,000 board feet. Those would be the main two volumes.
So we have to depend on someone else to tell us what that is.
Well, you can, again, if you want to be a super engaged landowner, when you get a check, you should have a mill slip, and on that mill slip, it should say, 1,500 board feet of white oak, 2,200 board feet of red oak. You should be keeping track, or could be keeping track of, how much volume is being cut off your property, what you're getting paid for. If you work with a forester, they probably will help you with that, but it depends on what you hire them to do. But if there's 30,000 feet of saw timber that's supposed to get cut off that property, you just keep track, keeping tally as you get checks in those slips, write down, okay, this is, 5,000 feet, this is 2,000 feet. Now you're up to, let's say, 19,000 feet, and they're pulling off the job. I'm like, wait a minute, there's 11,000 feet missing, so you should be asking questions like, what's going on here? So you should, you don't have to, but you really should be kind of keeping track of, as you get those mill slips, kind of just keeping track of the volume that you're getting paid for, just to keep everybody honest.
They're all call logs.
What's that?
They're all call logs.
But again, you don't have to. And again, your forester may not be kind of helping you out, but you should be keeping track of that.
Shouldn't that be in your contract with your forester?
It depends, it depends on what you hire your forester to do.
given us a lot of stuff here to do. Is this laid out in that book that you have?
A lot of it is, yeah, there definitely is a lot here, and
I mean,
again,
if we're gonna be expecting us to do this, it's gotta be someplace besides this talk where we can get this
Yep.
information.
yep, so our internet, our website, you can go to MFL and there's timber sales. There's a tab for cutting MFL. And there's a lot of the stuff is laid out in our website.
There's an MFL website or a DNR website.
It's, MFL is embedded in DNR. You can go to the DNR website and search managed forest law, and we have our own like bunch of stuff.
Okay.
On the website. So this stuff would be spelled out there.
Is this presentation?
It's recorded somewhere. I don't know where, but it'll be recorded somewhere. Or you can call your tax law forester and that's gonna do
I
it.
mean, if you should just print out the PowerPoint for us would be helpful, so I can just print that.
Yeah, I think I can do that if you asked. Didn't do it for everybody, but if you need a copy, but even with the PowerPoint, I mean, I really did cover the cutting notes pretty briefly, so you're probably even gonna need more information than that. So there is more information out there that we can supply you with. So again, this is kind of an overview. Do not hesitate to contact me or whoever your tax law forester is. And yes, we've covered a lot. We still have more to go. So again, just kind of recapping, your steps for successful harvest. Again, you can see it, you can find your plan, contact your tax law forester. The recommendation is to hire a cooperating forester, have a contract, and then just, again, so just make sure that you remember and understand that you have to have a cutting notice in place before you cut. Right, questions, any questions before we kind of transition? We're gonna transition into this little brochure here, conducting a successful timber sale. Again, it's just gonna be a brief overview. It's a lot of information. Again, don't expect you to retain everything. Always feel free to call your tax law forester if you have questions. All right, so we're gonna move into this, successful timber sale. So these kind of 7 points that we're gonna cover, just marking and appraising, kind of getting into the contract stuff and building roads and landings. We can kind of move on here. So like I mentioned before, it's super important if you can to get your timber marked. Hopefully by a forester. There's log mills out there who have foresters on staff that can mark timber. Even if you're working with a logger directly, if you can get them to mark the timber for you, or hire a forester just to mark the timber, getting the timber marked is very valuable. It's just, like I said before, it helps everyone to just be on the same page. There's no mystery. It's easier to enforce things, both on my side of things and on your side of things. So getting the timber sale marked is super important. And again, there's different ways you can go about doing that. But again, the bottom line is to have a successful timber sale, it really is important to get it marked. And again,
So it's after it's marked, you have to come out and look at it before it's cut.
I can, again, kind of going back to that, you do, depending on who you're working with, you have the ability or the option to ask me to come look or not, or you can say, I don't want you to come look. Depends on who you're working with, but I just suggest, I'm biased, but I suggest people to just have me look. To just make sure everything's kosher on the front end, because if they're not, once you can't glue trees back together. Yeah. But yes, if, sometimes we do unmarked sales, we do a lot of them, unfortunately, it's tough. Sometimes you can do it, but nobody really knows what's going on. Nobody knows what's gonna get cut, what's going to stay.
They take
So,
what they want and.
Right, yeah.
Leave the stuff they don't.
even if they say, hey, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, in the end, there's no, you don't know until it's over. And
For the money trees.
And it's hard there's no real enforcement, if it's not marked. Hard to write a contract, you can, but it's harder to do it when there's no trees marked.
Safe harbor is to get a hold of you guys.
Yeah.
Because if you okay it and it's wrong, it's on you, because you've looked at it.
Yeah, as long as it gets cut all the right way, yeah. I'm never wrong, so.
So there you go.
Okay, so, just kind of touching on appraising the value. Again, there's a lot that we can talk about here, but you want to have an understanding of what the value is of that timber. So obviously, if you're working with a forester, they're gonna do this for you. They're gonna know how much volume is roughly in that timber sale, you know, saw timber volume, cord volume, or pulp volume, bolt volume. They have an understanding of what the markets are, so they can tell you, hey, you know, this is the amount of volume we've got marked. This is roughly what we can expect as far as the value, you know, and then when they put it out for bids, you know, you're gonna look at, this is what we expect, and this is what we're getting. You know, and you can, if things aren't lining up, then you can have conversations and you know, with your forester to decide what to do. But if you're not working with a forester and you're working with a logger, and trees are not marked and you're trying to get the best price for your wood. So one of the common scenarios is, you know, a landowner will call 3 loggers. The loggers will walk the woods that's not marked. You know, look at it, call the landowner, yeah, I'll give you this much for it. But, you know, so you get 3 different prices for these from these loggers, but you have no idea what each person is looking to cut. You know, nothing's marked, so you have no way of comparing apples to apples because you don't know what these guys are thinking about as far as what they're gonna cut.
Unless it's a clear cut.
Unless it's a clear cut, yep. And then it's easier. But even then, if your boundary of your clear cut's not marked, you know, are you looking 5 acres, you're looking 10 acres? So again, even having the boundary marked, that helps. But a lot of times it's not that, you know, it's like, you know, it's a hodgepodge of how we're gonna cut this. If it's not marked, it's really hard to appraise or have an idea what your timber is worth. Again, you know, when you use the word appraise, but you're trying to get bids for your logs. And again, if it's not marked, it's just really hard to really compare one bid to the next bid. So again, if it's marked and you're not working with a forester, you're working with a logger, at least having it marked puts everybody on the same page and you have a better understanding. You know, when people give you a price, you can make a better, you can make a better decision on who to use, you know, because you know everyone's looking at the same thing. And a little bit of a note on that, as far as comparing bids. And again, this is if you're not working with a forester, you know, utilization is important. If you're working with a logger, it's marked and you're trying to work with a logger direct and they're giving you prices, again, start asking utilization questions. You know, are you gonna be paying me for pulp? Are you gonna be paying me for bolts? Are you gonna be paying me for saw logs? Because if you've got, excuse me, one guy who's bidding on the saw logs and they're really high on price, but they're not gonna be moving or paying you for your bolts or your pulp. But the next guy is less on the saw log prices, but he is paying you for bolts and pulp. He may not be paying as much for saw logs, but your total, what you get total on that sale quite often is gonna be more. So, you know, again, make sure you're asking those questions on utilization when you're trying to get bids on your project. Because again, you know, just because someone's higher on saw logs, and a lot of times people will see this with, you know, one guy's got a really high veneer price and it's totally beating everybody on his veneer red oak price, but he's really low on everything else. And you know, well, if as a landowner, if you understand in your woods, you have maybe one veneer red oak tree, you know, everything else is kind of poor quality or low quality material. You're better off going with the person who's got a little better price on your number 2 saw logs and number 3 saw logs, because that's where most of your volume is. So again, as a landowner, having a good understanding of what's in your woods as far as quality, you know, even before you start that bidding process. And again, having it marked, you know, helps eliminate a lot of that, you know, kind of confusion. But again, you know, there's a lot of questions to be asking if you're trying to bid this wood out on your own. And that's why, again, we encourage you to work with a forester.
A couple of things that we have run into. One of them is the logger that gives you a decent price, but it's 3 years down the road. Whereas another one is something less, but they can do it in 9 months. And then another thing that we have seen is they start the job and then they're gone, they're out of business. And, that leaves you between a rock and a hard place.
Yeah, those are kind of those are the, like, kind of the nightmare scenarios, and I don't have a good answer for, I get this question a lot, hey,
You gotta rely on your forester.
right, again, if you have a forester, those are the questions you need to be talking through with them guys. Again, that's where if you're on your own, it makes it more complicated. It's not impossible, but it makes it complicated. Because that's one of the problems you're gonna run into is you can sign a contract with a logger with these prices. But we talked already that you might be 3 years before you get that logger in there. Well, prices have changed. They've either gone up or they've gone down and, what do we do? Are you locked into the prices of that contract? And those are good questions to ask the person you're signing a contract with. So you understand, the contract may spell that out. But I've seen a lot of times it doesn't, there's no provision in the contract that says these prices will change or they're gonna be concrete, that's something to be asking, we got these prices in the contract, is this what you're gonna pay regardless, or is there flexibility? That could be to your benefit or could be a negative thing, depending on the market, but, that is one of the challenges with the market that we have right now, in the sense that we're not getting loggers in right away. Things are changing, every year, as far as price goes. All right. All right, looking at roads, trails, and landings. Again, your forester will help you with this. Sometimes it can be helpful if you get the loggers input, if you need roads, it's good to talk to the logger, because they will have a better understanding of what logistically makes sense, hey, I need a road here, because that's gonna help me, get the wood off of this slope or that slope, so getting their input will help. But again, locating roads, trails, and landings, is important. If you can do that ahead of time, have that laid out before you start talking to loggers, that will help sell the sale oftentimes. But if you're trying to sell your sale and you have no idea, you have no roads, you have no idea where you're gonna be able to put the logs, that's just gonna it's gonna complicate things with getting loggers interested. So if you have the ability to kind of plan out ahead of time where your roads and your landings are gonna be, if you gotta talk to a neighbor ahead of time, it's encouraged that you do that. But again, working with a forester on this, especially if you don't have roads, working with a forester who has the knowledge to know, hey, we should not put a road here, or we can put a road here, especially in these steep slopes. There's a right way and a wrong way to put roads in. So if you're working with a logger who doesn't really know much about putting roads in, then it's good to work with a reputable contractor in the county. You can talk to land conservation or NRCS about folks that they use for their projects. Bulldozer, guys with bulldozers. But again, if you have any questions on that, the forester would be a good resource. If you don't have a forester, the tax law guys can help you a little bit. But this could be a little tricky, but again, make sure that you are asking the right questions. The big thing is you don't want a road running down a drainage ditch. You don't want to be crossing a stream. If you are crossing a stream, you generally need a permit. And so you definitely want to be asking questions of your tax law forester about a permit, because that can get pricey if you get
For a
caught.
burial mound.
That will be covered somewhat in the cutting notice, because we'll look for that.
Yeah,
And you don't want to go through a burial mound.
more than once.
Okay, so again, we could talk a long time about this, so I just want to cover it briefly. There are different methods of selling timber. Just real briefly, you can sell a timber sale lump sum. So that means roughly how much volume you're cutting. And a log, you can make a contract with a logging company that they say, well, we're gonna give you X amount of dollars for the sale. We're not gonna scale anything, we're not gonna measure anything, it's just, you see what's out there, this is what we're gonna give you for that sale. That's called a lump sum sale. It's just a lump sum price. They will pay that, oftentimes they will pay that up front before they start the job. And then if they come out ahead, they come out ahead on volume. If they're short on volume, they're short on volume. It's a done deal. What they paid you is what they've paid you.
But either way, they scale it because the cutter's gotta get paid.
They'll do, yeah, but you're not a part of that. They'll do
Right.
that behind the scenes,
Right.
yeah. So, the alternative is to do a scaled sale, which means every stick of wood that comes out of the landing or off the woods onto the landing gets measured and you get paid by the volume that's measured. There's positives and negatives of doing each.
I need to know the volumes for the cutting.
If you're doing a lump sum, you're gonna just use the volume that you get paid for, essentially. So, the scaled sale, again, they're gonna measure each tree, they're gonna measure each log, they're gonna grade each log and you're gonna get paid. So your pricing that's in your contract, if you're doing scaled sales, they're gonna have, oftentimes, they're gonna list what you're gonna get paid for grade 1 red oak, grade 2 red oak, grade 1 white oak, they're gonna break it down by species and by grade oftentimes. And again, there's positives and negatives to doing both method. And again, if you're working with a forester, they can kind of help you kind of figure out what the best method is for doing that. But just wanted to bring it to your attention. Again, there's this pamphlet. There's a gentleman left, but again, this stuff that I'm talking about is going to be spelled out a lot more in-depthly in this packet here. Again, just wanted to bring it to your attention that there are different methods of selling timber. There's not one tried and true method that works. There's each sale might work with a different method, just depends on the scenario. All right, then, well, there's our Buffalo County machine. Again, we've talked about this a little bit, but then you want to select a logger. Again, you want to make sure that that logger pairs well with the type of practice that you're doing. If you got a couple clear cuts on a steep slope, you're probably not going to be hiring a guy in a machine because he's not going to be able to do it. So you want to make sure when you're talking to these loggers, again, talk about, what kind of equipment do they have? What kind of utilization? What are they able to sell you? Or what are they able to pay you for? What are they able to move out of that woods? Are they going to be selling pulp? Are they going to be selling bolts? So you just want to make sure that the logger is the right fit for the project that you have. Again, are they willing to cut the non-merchantable material? Are they not? What kind of compromises can you come up with? So again, we've already kind of covered the questions to be asking, but again, you as a landowner should have an understanding of, your acreage, the slopes, the type of practice, if you're talking to the loggers yourself. Again, if you're using a forester, that forester is going to alleviate the burden because they're going to be having those conversations with the landowners. Okay, and then just monitoring the sale. Again, as a landowner, it's your property. Make sure you're visiting the site and just, be aware of what's going on. If you start to see problems like, big ditches or big ruts in your roads, make sure you say something. Talk to your forester, talk to the logger, talk to the tax law forester. If you're in MFL and you have this kind of stuff, especially the ruts happening or the erosion, that's a no-no in MFL. You are required to fix those kind of things. So if you're seeing that happen, make sure you kind of stop production and you talk to the logger, talk to your forester, talk to the tax law forester before it gets worse. So again, if you're a landowner and you don't visit the site at all and you come back after the project is done and this kind of stuff is left, obviously it's going to be harder to deal with on the back end. So again, try to visit the site while it's active. The loggers see that you are present and that you are involved. It's going to keep them honest too. So, but sometimes things happen, and again, if you can catch it early on and work with your logger to kind of make some changes, do some fixes, and that's going to make things go so much smoother in the long run. We don't have a picture of it, but one thing, to keep in mind, when you're looking at these sales, look at the trees that are left. Make sure that, a lot of the trees that are left, look at their tops, make sure their tops aren't all busted out, or there's a bunch of bark skinned off the trees that are being left. If you can be out there early and start, if you could catch that early, that's gonna save you a lot of problems in the future. Again, occasionally what we'll see is, loggers aren't really paying attention to what they're doing when they're dropping trees. You might have a lot of your residual trees that we're hoping will be your future crop. A lot of those residual trees might have their tops busted out, or the logger dropped trees right along the stem and scuffed off all the bark. And if that isn't brought up with that logger early on, if that's the way they do business, if you don't get out there early, you can be left with a disaster at the end. So, that's something to keep an eye on, erosion. And then, make sure that the residual trees, the trees that they're leaving in the woods, aren't being damaged. Because again, that's your future crop. All right, complete post-harvest administration, that's a lot of what I will do. If you're working with a forester, they're gonna do it. But you just wanna check that site when the loggers are finishing up, and again, make sure that there's not rutting, there's not erosion, there's no issues. So it's good to be in communication with your logger. Again, be active with your logger and tell them, hey, when you're a week or a couple days, from being done, let me know, because I wanna come out and look. So again, be in communication with your loggers. You really should, either you or your forester, be getting out there before that machinery leaves the site, just check things over, make sure they cut everything they were supposed to cut, make sure there isn't erosion problems, or make sure there's not a bunch of wood laying somewhere in the forest, in the back 40. So it's important, again, that you be in communication, you or your forester, be in communication with the logger, try to get out and check the site before the loggers leave the site. Just to make sure, like I said, everything is the way it should be. And then real quick, there's a lot of information. The gentleman left, he was asking, but there is a lot of information on the internet about successful timber sales. I have a handout back there that I printed this page and the next page. There's a lot of good information out there that you can read, kind of going through what we've covered briefly. There on this website, and again, I have this printed in the back, but this website is this timber sale brochure that this talk is kind of based off of. But a lot of good information on the internet. You can print it off. If you don't have access to the computer, I can oftentimes, or your tax law forester can print it. Again, I do have this printed off in the back with the websites, so you don't have to write them down. But a lot of good information. Like I said, I just talked about, this brochure, try to breeze through it, but there's, 15 pages. So there's a lot of good information that you can sit down and read through. Let's see. All right, so this is just a recap of what we talked about. Won't spend a lot of time on that. So again, I know we covered a lot of information. Could be information overload. Again, it is a lot of good information, and there's a lot of good stuff out there that you can dig deeper into. But do you have any questions? And in particular, do you have any questions about your obligations under the managed forest law program? All right, just for the sake of time, I'm gonna let Dennis and Josh give their talks on cost share programs. But after they're done, I'll be here if you got questions you wanna talk about. Feel free to come talk to me. I don't know. Who wants to go first, Dennis or Josh?
Kurt, don't mind. Mine's real short, I'll close.
Dennis is up. I just gotta load his presentation here.
3 years after, where that, nobody wants to watch it no more.
Well, it's a good, very big issue.
Let's try to stop sharing. Yeah.
And him to be.
There you go.
Oh, I know, yes, some moving traffic. Big round, they found the cut, they walked in, using there. and they-
Here we go. Welcome, folks. My name is Dennis Reimers. I work here in Buffalo and Pepin counties, so I don't know if you're another one of the neighboring landowners. I can get you in contact if you need contact. NRCS folks over there.
Yeah.
Just here to talk about one of the main programs, and actually one of our helpers here, Rob back here, just started with us, in partnership with the Rock Grouse, so. So just here to talk about one of our main programs, like Brent had mentioned, there's a lot of these. There's some non-mandatory practices that could be in your plan for timber stand improvement work, or just even helping out. I would say, if they're doing the clear cut mandatory side, you know, some of these other cleanup work anyway. And so we'll go over that, just a handful of these practices and just kind of our environmental quality incentives program. So these are dollars that come down through the federal farm bill. We get quite a bit of money here in the state of Wisconsin, to work with, our private lands anyway. Oh, what button you push here? huh?
Left click.
Right, quick.
No,
Yeah.
left click.
Why don't you advance?
Can you just advance it?
Yeah.
So we provide any technical and financial assistance through that. We have 54 service centers available, so if it isn't just land here in Buffalo County, it could be up in Ashland, it could be throughout the area. The main one that we'll be talking about is generally our EQIP program here. Probably don't have to worry about a lot of you guys here, because if you're already in MFL, one of the main things we're going to talk about, some of the first steps that are being considered before practices, forest management plan. A lot of times landowners enrolled land in the managed forest law 15, 20 years ago. They might only put in what was able to be closed at the time. Some of the rules changed, so now they have half the farm with a management plan, half the farm without, so we can deal with that. On that. You want to go to the next slide, bro?
Yeah.
They call it cost share. We pay flat rates, so it isn't on a percentage basis. 70-30, they kind of develop these rates on paying roughly about 75% of the, of the actual cost. And we can go over that. It has to meet some of the NRCS criteria, so we'll have our specs spelled out. If you're funded, it'll say, hey, yes, remove all the box elder, elm, ironwood out there if it's more on the forest and improvement side. If we're on the brush side, invasives and whatnot, that'd be spelled out, if it's buckthorn, multiflora, rose, honeysuckle, some of these, and in the stump treatment. Typical contract for work is usually 2 to 3 years. Can be up to 10. I've never gone that far. If it gets beyond 5 years, there's a lot of things that change in 5 years, so typically it's shorter. Forest must be owned as non-industrial private, so we're not working with big corporations. There are income limitations for the federal farm bill programs. I don't set those. Those are set by Congress. As of right now, it's an adjusted gross income, average 3 years of $900,000 or less. So it's set fairly high. I run into folks every year though, that can't check no to that. On forest line, forest plan is the first step. Coordinated practice considered. These can also, if you have land that doesn't have a plan, those are also can be a cost share. Next slide. So you'll work with NRCS to determine if the project is feasible.
A lot of times, if it's just woodland you own, maybe you don't have records established at the Farm Service Agency yet, that's our sister agency. If you have cropland, generally that's being rented out, generally they'll have some type of record, but we'll work with through that process to get you a farm track number that. Submitting an application, it's 2-3 pages, it's is it private land, is it, rented land that you're working on? Sometimes we deal with trusts, sometimes we deal with entities, LLCs, and so we have to work through some of that. Legalities and paperwork on that. A lot of times we'll take applications at least once a year, they call it a batching period, sometimes twice, depends on if they're not able to burn up all their funds in the first one. For 2024, the sign up application first batch was November of 2023. So we took all the applications in the rest of 2023, we ranked them, scored them. That big. The applications that rank high enough are offered contracts. We're in a general fund pool for, it's Barron County, Dunn County, Pepin County, and Buffalo County. So those are applying for our forestry funds throughout those 4 counties. I had 12 to 15 accepted under the 2024 sign up here for, I don't know, roughly about $75,000 here for line timber work, just in Buffalo County. It's not what's that would go.
On how many total applications?
Oh, good question. Between all those counties,
No, you said you had how many approved for Buffalo County?
for Buffalo is 12 to 15.
How many applications did you
For
get
Buffalo itself,
roughly?
could have been greater. They might have funded all of them. I'd have to look down the list. They put a lot of high priority on a lot of the forestry stuff the last 2-3 years.
Because there's so many good people there.
That's true. Well, just a lot of actively engaged landowners, that's the main thing. Also talks about, yes, we already talked about the NRCS standard criteria, and we'd have that all spelled out. A lot of times it's in conjunction with what's written in kind of your forest management plans, because that's one thing we don't want you to get in trouble with, even on if it's non-mandatory practice. Hey, what we're doing on here on another site could be a thinning, could be just timber stand improvement, getting rid of junk trees. We don't want you to get in trouble either with your MFL. So we have a lot of great foresters that we work with, Josh Rasmussen, Rob himself, that I know enough to be dangerous out there. I'm on the soil erosion end and agronomy end, and I can, definitely get you on these weed trees and stuff, but if it's gonna be in there, on a walnut thinning, what basal area you want, crown canopy and that type of thing. Those guys they're your ones, but I'll be along with them, usually walking where they'll give me that. Next slide, Rick. Some of the common practices, like I said, if you don't have a forest management plan, anybody here don't have a forest management plan? That's good. And that's really your basis roadmap, running a whole bunch of people there. So we're not gonna worry about this practice, and we're gonna skip right over this. We'll go to the next slide. And the other one, forest stand improvement, that's where you are getting rid of these non-commercial, value tree, your box elders, your elms, what are you gonna do with it versus that? So it falls under this big umbrella of forest stand improvement. Covers wide range, like you said, the silviculture techniques. Common applications include tree release, non-commercial thinning, tree marking. You don't get a whole lot of tree marking here. More so if you're maybe in a first time pine thinning or something, I've had some landowners apply for marking. But usually if you're working on a clear cut, they mark the boundary. That's the trees that are marked. Crop tree releasing, if you're familiar with that, releasing some of your good crop trees that you want to be there for seed production. Get rid of the junk trees around it within a 15-20 foot area. Go through your woods and thin it out so you get more mass production. And let's go to the next one. Brush management. Somebody mentioned invasives in here. I think Brent mentioned on that. Typically, that's not a mandatory practice on your end, but generally, if you have some of these older management plans, a lot of times those weren't listed. Just due to the fact they might not have been around 20 years ago, for one thing. And so we see a lot of buckthorn here, in parts of the county, honeysuckle in some other areas, but yeah, if you're in there managing your woods, and if you are gonna be doing a thinning clear cut, you just don't wanna open the canopy up for these invasives, so you're gonna wanna attack those at the same time that you're in there and take care of those, so, or if you have a pretty good harvest coming up here in the near future, is to get rid of that understory first of that brush and invasives, and then when they come and knock that canopy off, that's already dead and gone, so. With that,
Seeds in the ground.
what's that?
That's the seeds in the ground.
There's definitely seeds in the ground, and then maybe what's brought on if you don't have clean equipment. So typically what we're doing on our brush management, and if we're doing a buckthorn treatment, it's usually a 2 or 3 year project. You'll come in there with the heavy hitters and cut out, the bad stuff, stump treat that, and we'll have 1 or 2 follow-up years coming behind it, because there's seedlings sprouting, there's stuff that, hey, I know I cut that, nope, it's there, and just a few things that you miss, so it's usually a couple of years.
You cut one big buckthorn, you got 300 foliars the next year.
Yeah, and that's,
I cut a bunch of mine.
It's like I'd rather just have the one than the 300.
I don't know if you'll ever eradicate it, you can manage it.
You just get it mad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, our rates, just sitting there going back to, on kind of the forest stand improvement, there's one kind when you're doing single stem treatment like that. It's right around $300 an acre. They're doing a flat rate on that. And when we get into invasives, it's anything from, I'd say on average, $130 all the way up to $650, depending on how much work, how many stems and that type of thing. So.
Yeah, but this gonna cost you $1,000 worth of herbicide to kill all.
Yeah, but you can write it off.
Sure.
There you go.
Yeah. Yeah, and in some situations, you get out there and I might just say, or even before, it might be too far gone. As far as the amount of invasives, and it maybe just not, you maybe never get ahead of it.
It's all the realtor.
Not quite yet. Another question?
With your agency, is there anything such as a controlled burn?
They have, we've done a few, it would have to be written in your forest management plan. I just don't see a lot of good kill on some of that stuff. It's timing. It's not something that, I would say on the real small stuff, but you get in some of that big stuff, you need a pretty hot fire. Burning is very expensive. So.
Then the big red trucks.
Mark would know.
I know.
What if it's a south facing slope? Go prairie.
Goat Prairie's a whole nother ballgame. That's where we utilize some of our brush management on, is to manage these goat prairies. It's really not a forestry prescription. You're getting the brush off to let that native ecosystem grow out there. Burning them, hell, if it's a normal winter, the little goat prairies burned off.
They're just burning
you
one
got
down the
snow.
road here on the way in.
Oh, did they get one?
Yeah, they're burning one here down the
Right at
road.
the top of the ridge.
Oh, thanks. So yeah, typically, those are burned, in March, April, when snow is still ringing the woods, yes. Fire will race uphill, very slow going down now, but, yeah, whole nother monster to deal with. Some of the steepest, hardest work conditions are on our goat birds. Very shallow rock. Next slide.
Not an endangered species. Huh?
And some, yes, there is. Yep. And that's why we run some of these reviews, and that's why our timings have to be early on some. Another one we dabble a little bit in, not so much on our forestry, because a lot of times we're relying on native, either stump sprouting under the harvest or just native seed out there, but there could be openings in the woods that, that maybe never had, forestry work, or adjacent fields that you want to turn into forestry, but we do a fair amount of tree planting here in the county as well. Typically, if it's gonna have red oak in there, these are, they're tubed anyway, because of the deer browse here, potential. Ranges anywhere from, I'd say, $1.25 a tree up to probably $10, $11 with a tree or two per tree. So they'd have to be spelled out in the forest management plan. Next slide. This is just some of the other funding avenues that we have come in that you might hear in the news or Secretary Vilsack or whatnot, Inflationary Reduction Act money. Our typical EQIP budget here in the state of Wisconsin was probably 28-30 million. With the additional IRA money this year, went to about 56 million. So we about doubled in the state, so. On that, but these are some of the high priority forestry practices that slide into some of that fund. So if these are some of the practices being applied for, we get more than one funding avenue to try to get our landowners, so.
What's a carbon storage benefit?
Which one?
And plant trees.
Carbon storage benefit, plant trees?
Yeah, they take carbon out of the atmosphere. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And the CO2.
Here I thought it was some tax thing.
That, well, there's people selling carbon credits, so. Yeah. So yes, but we have a short time window with that. I believe, yeah, it's through 2027, some of these funds, like, higher. So this is our first go around with it, just this year. Next, Brett. Any other questions on my end?
You had box elder in your presentation. How about black locust?
That's one there we can take care of too. Yep, it's a whole different monster. Different
Yeah,
herbicide.
I know.
They're hard to kill.
Yeah, great firewood though. You like to cut. Yeah, it's definitely purpose of yours. I'll be around here. I like I said, I run the Putnam County as well as what it is here in Buffalo County, so.
When are you in Pepin?
Usually I try to get up there at least one day a week.
Oh, not a specific day then.
No, it just depends on, I got a couple of other good workers up there that handle that. I've been working in Putnam County since 2005, been running both offices since 2016. So very familiar here in the Griffiths area and some of the, just knowing on how much time and effort that it does take to work in this woodland and work with a lot of great consulting foresters. You know, some of the average age of our guys, there's like, I can't physically do it, but there are a lot of consulting foresters that are out there. And they're working on some of these MFL plans. That's where some of our customers come from. They'll push them our way and say, hey, let's get this funding going and that type of thing. So, feel free to give me a call, or if you need one of my counterparts, I can get you their contact. Okay.
Yeah, are you guys listed by county also?
Generally, you get up north and they'll cover 3-4 counties. You get up to Ashland and he takes
Right.
4 counties up there, but generally, yeah, in your county seat. So yeah, there's an office in Whitehall.
Oh, okay.
For Trumbull County, here in Alma, on Alaska, down in La Crosse. So, but
Josh,
Thanks, John.
what's your email?
Me?
Sure.
Oh, yes.
I got some cards. right
Oh, okay.
there, guys. Yep, if you want to grab one at the end.
All right, I'm Josh. I'm the Buffalo County Public and Private Land Forester, and I'm gonna go over Whipple Gap. Which
Yeah, sorry,
is,
yeah.
There you go.
Do you work in Trumbull too, Josh?
what's it? I did at one point.
I mean, you're a private forester.
Yeah,
On the
well,
private side.
I do, but there's a Trumbull County Forester as well.
Alright.
Same position, just different county. Each county has one in this area. So we kind of covered public land and then assist with all private.
Okay, that's what you meant by private.
Yep, yep. Not setting up timber sales.
All right, I thought you meant like, yeah, you have your own business besides working for the state.
Nope, they won't let me do that. Otherwise I would. So this is, the DNR funding. It's the Wisconsin Forest Landowner Grant Program, or Whipple Gap for short. Go to the next slide. So this is a DNR program. It's similar to NRCS, but this is actually a 50-50 cost share. To be eligible, you gotta have 10 acres of land, not more than 500, which I learned when I made this slide. And you also have to have a forest management plan, but you're in an MFL meeting, so
500 acres of total land or forest land.
forest land,
Okay.
I think. This is about this thick. And I gotta keep reading it. Every time I read it, I'm like, oh, more things. You can go to the next one. So this is a 50-50 cost share, straight 50-50. So it's not a set acre limit like equipment and CSP. So you are expected to contribute half of anything that we would set up a project, you would be expected to pay half of it. You could do the project yourself, or you can hire somebody. If you do the project yourself, we pay out at $15 an hour. That's our rate, which I thought was a little cheap, but maybe that'll get changed with inflation.
Minimum wage is going to 20 now.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. So for example, I come out, we set up a project, you submit the application. We estimate it's gonna cost $8,000. Project gets finished, you submit your receipts to me, and the state would reimburse you that $4,000. So you would be expected to pay that total upfront. Like I said, the project can be completed by you or hired, and each contract, once it's signed, you'll have 2 years to get it done. There can be a year extension, but makes paperwork kind of painful. You can go to the next one. Here's the eligible practices. So we have priority 1 practices and priority 2. From what I have heard, I'm pretty new, but there's never been a priority 2 practice funded. So this gets filled up. There's a certain set of limit amount, and it's a first come, first serve, and the priority 1 practices get fulfilled first. So here's the things that are in the priority 1 forest stewardship plan development. So that could be an MFL plan, or there is such thing as a forest stewardship plan, which you guys would not be interested because you're already in MFL, but that's a similar program, but doesn't have the tax incentive. Reforestation, afforestation, so that could be planting after a harvest or planting in an old soybean field. Forest health and improvement, so that would be your invasive control, your timber stand improvement. Those are the main things I see. Some of this stuff, a lot of people obviously want to do deer habitat work. As you see here, wildlife habitat enhancement is that priority 2 practice. But a lot of wildlife enhancement can be done with forest health improvement. So doing some of that timber stand improvement, thinning out your understory, getting more light to the ground, thickening up, on your thicker stand timber can be considered wildlife practice and get funded, but you just have to be creative when I write. Then soil and water protection, that's more like shelter belt plantings or planting along riparian units. Then those are the priority 2 practices, and again, I'm not sure why they're there, but they don't get funded. This is done on a first come, first served basis. I think the next slide will talk a little bit more about that, but this one. Slide.
Next one.
Yeah. Okay, so the award process. Once you submit an application, a letter will get sent to you. And the project cannot be started before you get that letter. So it could take a year or up to 2 years to get funded. So you cannot start that project until you get awarded the money. All costs will be tracked. Things that you should be tracking while you're doing this: receipts for anything you buy, like chemical. Can't buy equipment. You can't buy like a chainsaw with this or a tractor. But your hours, chemical, and any equipment rental. We can do equipment rates if you own your own equipment. It would just be similar to what you could go up to Lindstrom and rent, like a skid steer or something. When you're done, you'd call me. I'd come check it out, make sure you did it all right. Submit all your receipts, and you would get 50% of that original estimated dollar amount. Even if you spent more, say we had an $8,000 project and you spent $10,000, we could only reimburse up to that half of what the original estimated cost was. So if you get $4,000, yep, the original. So we can't change it after if you spend more money.
So get the
Yeah.
estimate high from the get-go.
Go high. We do have set dollar limits that we can do. We have a do not exceed limit for each practice, similar to NRCS, but it's more confusing than them.
Can we use it with an NRCS program? So if you're getting a $100 reimbursement from them and the whole thing costs $300, can we use your program on
Can't.
on the second $200 and go?
Yeah, you can't double dip, you can't do the same practice on the same acres. You can have a Whipple Gap and an equip, but they have to be in different areas, or be doing separate things.
Different, same area, but, or same land, but different project.
Yeah, it would have to be different projects. You can go to the next one. We missed one? Should have been up.
Yeah, you had.
Yeah, I was like, man, what's the award?
Application process.
Okay, yeah, so you can submit applications whenever you want, year round, continuous. But it's a one-page application. You fill it out, you submit a W-9, and then I fill out the second page, it's real simple. But these go into a central office and they get batched February 1st, May 1st, August 1st, and November 1st. Majority of these applications are gonna get funded in August. So if you're thinking you wanna do a project, I just had someone submit one, I sent to the state office, they said they're full until 2025. So if you're thinking about doing a project, think well in advance, at least a year. And a lot of these forestry projects, you know, if you look in your MFL plan, it's calling for a clear cut or a thinning, you can start working on this stuff 10 years before it's mandatory. And it's actually gonna be better for your longevity, your forest, try to get some regeneration in before you start harvesting. Loggers don't like to work around big brushy messes, so if you come in and cut all the buckthorn 2 weeks before they come in, they don't like tripping on that stuff. So if you can do it before and get a good kill, it's better to work ahead than in my opinion. And that was pretty much it. I'll make a map of any projects we do. Yeah, it's a pretty simple process, one-page application. Give me a call, we can fill it out. Any questions? I had some cards in the back, if you want. Then Trempealeau County, it's gonna be the same thing, there's the forester works out of White. Name's Ryan Strand.
Thanks for that.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank y'all, guys.
So, yeah, just want to thank you for coming and enduring.
Information overload.
Yeah, I would say there's a lot of information. First time we've done this, this way, so it might refine it a little bit. If you have any questions, again, call your tax law forester. Happy to talk you through some of this stuff. Again, appreciate you sitting through it all. As a reminder, I've got 2 handouts back there. One's a sheet that, like, it's a checklist of questions to ask your logger. And then there's another sheet, it's two of the PowerPoint slides, but it has the internet addresses on it for the information. So they're both back there. Feel free to take both. Again, if you got questions, you can stay today and ask, or again, call me or whoever your tax law forester is. So again, appreciate your questions, appreciate sitting through it all, and again, admit there's a lot of information, so don't be discouraged, just now you know.
We should have got the county board chairs. They're an awful lot softer than these.
Yeah, well,
Now, how would you know? You ever been on the board?
No. But I've known some guys that were.
We might have had them hooked up to the electric fence or something.